My name is Lieutenant Colonel Adam Latham, and I'm Bronco 07. I'm the Senior Brigade Trainer here at the National Training Center. So what is a Combined Arms Rehearsal? As defined by FM60, it's a scripted event involving the commander, staff, and units to identify and solve problems. This is an opportunity for a commander to gather both his staff and his subordinate commanders to confirm synchronization, look at where everybody sits in time and space, and to validate the fighting products that his staff has created during the military decision-making process. So what are some of the elements we see of a successful combined arms rehearsal? First is a terrain model. So all a terrain model is a map big enough to be seen by everyone and big enough for the players or your subordinate units to move along the map as they conduct their respective actions. This should match the operational graphics that you put out as part of your operations order. Think of it a lot of times like what you do with a Pop Warner team when you're teaching them a new football play. You want something where the entire team can sit out there and walk through the play step by step. It's no different with a terrain model. In a distributive rehearsal, if you're conducting your combined arms rehearsal and it's distributive, you want to make sure that you have enough terminals where everybody can see what you're doing. A successful combined arms rehearsal is only as good as all the players being able to either be on the board or see the actions that are taking place so they can understand everybody in time and space. Second is the synchronization matrix. This does not necessarily have to be your synchronizing device, synchronization matrix, or an X-check. Whatever your synchronizing device happens to be, that's what you want to use as the script for your combined arms rehearsal. What you don't want to do is you don't want to create a separate script. Because ultimately what that turns into is just people reading as they go through the combined arms rehearsal. They're just reading you a story. What you want to do is you want to use this as an opportunity to validate whatever that synchronizing device happens to be. Next is your briefing order. You want to approach each turn over the course of a combined arms rehearsal in a systematic manner where each person briefs in systemic turn. Next you have your fighting products. These are the products that you put out as part of your operations order that help the commander visualize the fight. We have a series of recommended fighting products that the NTC puts out, and you want to go ahead and again use this as a validating opportunity for you and your subordinate commanders. Okay, the last aspect of a successful CAR is you want to make sure you have the right participants. A part of that is you want to make sure you have a note taker, somebody who is taking notes as different items of friction or different changes to the plan emerge over the course of the combined arms rehearsal. You want to make sure you have somebody who's adequately covering all of those bases. A few common pitfalls that we see often here at the National Training Center that lead to a less than optimal combined arms rehearsal. First and foremost, it's not a rebrief of the order. As a recommendation, we would commend that the staff briefs no more than 5 minutes in terms of a scene setter. You want to get commanders on the terrain model or engaged in the rehearsal starting the synchronization as fast as possible. The assumption going into a rehearsal is everybody's read the order already. So you want to go ahead and lead right in to make sure you're actually getting after the synchronizing of your respective event. Secondly, we sometimes see commanders as spectators on the sidelines having a separate conversation while the staff is executing the plan on the terrain model. What that means is the commanders are often building their own plan, which is separate from what's being rehearsed. You want to make sure those are the same. And so what that means for the commander, hey, be out there, and if there's a point of friction that you need to resynchronize with an adjacent commander or with a subordinate, do it where everybody can hear it so everybody has common understanding. Again, the desired end state here is everybody understands the commander's visualization, how he sees the fight unfolding. That the only way you do that is you make sure you have a common picture. Everybody has to be privy to the conversation. You want to make sure that you're grounded in time. Many times we see units come through, especially if they're not familiar with executing a combined arms rehearsal, and they cultivate a separate script. And what you have is you just have people reading off of that script over the course of that combined arms rehearsal. We're not synchronizing, we're not identifying problems at this point, we're just telling each other a story. And that probably misses the mark in terms of what the combined arms rehearsal is designed to get after. For commanders, you want to brief in terms of decision, intent, risk, and triggers. And those things are important. We want to make sure we understand and we have common understanding of what things are going to drive a commander to do something. what things trigger the subsequent action. And then we all understand, so we make sure those triggers are well synchronized and they're going to meet the requirements of the plan. We often see units challenged at the battalion level and higher to adequately address direct fire control and terrain management. What this sometimes leads into as we get into force on force is an increased risk of fratricide simply because we haven't discussed TRPs or how we're deconflicting direct fires, and we haven't managed terrain, so we often see sometimes units tend to overlap. This can all be deconflicted in a good combined arms rehearsal. Some great TTPs that we see units adopt either before they arrive or while they're here at the National Training Center. The key to a successful combined arms rehearsal is you want to get commanders engaged inside of 5 minutes. We'd synchronize triggers and time. Finally, we discuss direct fire control measures. Hey, let's go ahead and take a look at a combined arms rehearsal that was filmed by Operations Group as they simulated 2nd ABCT First ID, and see how commanders dive right in, getting it onto the terrain model, and how we synchronize those events.
41, 16, 1800. There's one decision point during this time block, decision point 1, which is triggered by the neutralization of the X2S6 in their disruption zone, which will the decision is for us to launch a platoon of attack aviation and conduct a zone recon. I'll be followed by pledge.
During this time, we have one echelon above brigade asset collecting. That is Vader providing healant in the Valley of Death to Siberia to Red Lake Pass, this area. Follow us off.
Soft action during this phase, I have 2 ODAs in the vicinity of John Wayne Pass, one in Nebron. They're going to take out IADs in order to open mobility corridor. Followed by 5-4.
This is Long Knife 6. Currently, the squadron is located in a TAA south of our LD. Our combat power is 14 tanks, 41 Bradleys, 6 mortar systems. We're task organized with 8 Stinger teams, an EW platoon TACON, and then TACON for movement. We have a brigade retrans, and the MLIDs and Sentinel radar. A whole on our task and purpose, and our scheme of maneuver for our LD will be followed by Dragon.
So Dragon 06, 163 Armored Task Force Dragon. Combat power for this phase of the operation, 29 M1A2s, 18 Bradley fighting vehicles, 9 infantry squads, 4 1064 mortar carriers, 3 ABVs, 5 jabs, 1 Avenger platoon with 3 Avenger systems, and 1 Sentinel. I have no decisions point at this time. Right now we're currently at Santa Fe, waiting our movement into our attack position, vicinity of the Whale Gap.
Okay, so what did we just see? First and foremost, we saw commanders immediately getting involved. We weren't spectators in terms of our plan. We were on the terrain model talking through decisions, intent, risk, and triggers. We avoided the trap of rebriefing the op order. Everybody's already read the op order. We're getting right into synchronizing maneuver and all the other respective warfighting functions. And we're already familiar with the terrain model. We're not spending an awful lot of time rebriefing where everything is in the terrain model in a big, long orientation. We see not just battalion commanders on the board, but we also see subordinate commanders executing their respective maneuver. What that does, and again, there's some risk associated with bringing that crowd together for a long time, but what that does is it makes sure that that brigade commander's visualization is populated 2 levels down. This also provides us with the opportunity to ensure that our subordinates are nested, so everybody understands the respective intent as we continue. Let's take a look at some of the products that we've gone ahead and brought to the Combined Arms Rehearsal to make sure that we have a good synchronizing event. First and foremost, you're going to look at a butcher block, and that lays out what time block we are across our synchronization matrix. You want to make sure that everybody has a clear picture of exactly what time we're talking about. Secondly, we have a blow-up of the sync mat. That way everybody can go ahead and look at the wall to go ahead and reference where we are as we go through this event. During this next scene, we'll see how important commanders are and why they're on the terrain model and need to be active participants in terms of the Combined Arms Rehearsal.
Task Force Thunder, our trigger to LD is once Alpha and Bravo Company 163 are set inside of their assault position. Once we've completed and met that trigger, we'll continue our maneuver. My order of march from the attack position is going to be my Alpha Company followed by my mortars and my Charlie company. We'll move to our contact point where our scouts have pre-staged with Bravo troop in order to go ahead and begin our movement towards route bears, coming through route bears. Depending on the amount of timing, we will release it, our release point from route bears with my lead element for my Alpha company. My direct fire control measures at this time, I have an RFL to my east for 163, and I also have one to the west with 5-4, and internally my Alpha company will be oriented on TRPs 1 through 4 as it starts its maneuver into support by fire position 1 to begin setting conditions for our seizure of objective Angels. I'll be followed by 118.
Hey, Duke, I just want to highlight some a trigger that we adjusted yesterday, predicated on our concern about how long you were going to be spending in those attack positions. When you're set so literally as those vehicles are moving into attack, that's when we're going to go ahead. So just to minimize that commitment time.
Yeah. So yeah, what we talked about this morning, as soon as our Charlie company passes OPKC, that's the radio call that I'll give to Soviet, so she can quickly. That's where we need that multiple deployment.
Right, and that's the idea. Is just so that trigger is pretty tight in terms of making sure that we can get 270 into zone fast enough, so you're not just sitting there, burning hours in attack position. Yep. Awesome. Okay, let's keep going, please. Okay, so what did we just see? One of the things that we want to highlight, again, it's so important for both company, battalion, and brigade commanders to be involved as part of the combined arms rehearsal. First and foremost, we've highlighted some friction, and we have battalion commanders with the brigade commander executing a discussion in open forum for how to refine triggers to make sure that the synchronization of the plan works. Secondly, we see a brigade commander as an active participant, able to give guidance, and able to go ahead and refine triggers over the course of the operation so everybody understands his common visualization. Okay, the next part that we're going to take a look at highlights the importance of direct fire control measures as we start taking a look at how they integrate into a combined arms rehearsal.
This is Long Knife 6. I've reached an internal decision point to resupply my tank company and to begin the resupply effort of my Comanche troop now that they've passed 270th Armor. I still await 270th Armor reaching phase line Cowboys, which will trigger my direct fire and indirect fires onto objective Angels West. No change to the rest of my situation. We followed by...
Talk to me about when do we adjust our RFLs as 270 comes around? Just talk me through that piece so we have common understanding.
So I continue to fire on objectives Angels West and objectives Angels East as 270th comes around Blackfoot troop. Once they establish on phase line Cowboys, that's our trigger to consolidate fires onto objective Angels West, and then our boundary effectively becomes an RFL at that point.
So, and I'm tracking Cowboys is about where Charlie Company is right now. Is that fair?
No, Cowboys is actually, it's on the terrain model right here. So we'll continue to maneuver based off the TRPs that we have, our left limit, what he's looking at.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what we just saw. In the last scene, we saw 270 discussing how we go ahead and make sure we have the appropriate direct fire control measures as they are juxtaposed with another adjacent unit. We see a brigade commander giving guidance in terms of where he thinks that direct fire control measure needs to go to avoid fratricide between two of his subordinate elements. This is critically important to make sure that we highlight this during the combined arms rehearsal to ensure that's commonly understood throughout the entire formation. In this next clip, we see the importance of highlighting triggers over the course of the combined arms rehearsal. Triggers are an important coordination and synchronization tool. When they occur on the battlefield, they prompt units to begin an action or a movement. This helps ensure coordination and synchronization by giving units an actual event that needs to happen before they start their subsequent action. Triggers have the added benefit of enhancing the commander's understanding at echelon. It is critically important that we go ahead and rehearse these triggers and highlight when they happen over the course of a combined arms rehearsal, and then enable commanders at echelon to adjust them with everybody around understanding.
Task Force Dragon, no later than 1,000 hours, Charlie Company clears objective Braves south. Sir, I think this is a decision point for you in terms of have we set conditions, because Alpha and Bravo are ready to go. We've had observation with the scouts on the breach. And so my next hit time is not until 1600 for that breach. And I'll have a foothold secured at Charlie at 1000, and then Alpha and Bravo will already received a splash and they're ready to go. So really, I think the decision point for you is, have we obtained enough with 5-4 and 270 for the multiple dilemmas and set conditions what we need to deep to initiate that breach before 1600?
Okay, so a couple of things that, I acknowledge all, and I think that's a good discussion to have right here. So passing it to lightning, what do we have in position ready to fire if we wanted to push the breach early?
You'll have Bravo battery and Charlie battery in position ready to fire.
And they can range if we needed to go ahead and shoot suppression and obscuration.
Absolutely.
Okay, for 2-7, for the FSO, talk to me about, where are we in terms of our convergence window? Because I'm passing traffic I'm grabbing stuff from division to shoot. And the earliest that is 1600.
So we have division, IC laid on, as well as MLRS coverage from 16 to 1800, sir. We also have cast on station during that window. So that's really, that 2-hour window from 16 to 1800 is where division's helping us out and giving us that convergence window to make this breach happen.
So I think part of the risk is, I'm down to 2 batteries that could potentially both shoot for you and then still shoot counter batteries. So what I'm going to do, let me take that on, and then for 3, let's go ahead, let's explore that a little bit, and we can kind of come back and kick something in a frag out. Let's continue to review the base. And go with what we have right now, but we can take that on and take a look at it.
Sir, as of right now, you have MLRS coverage in support of counterfire for this period.
So conceivably, I can pass traffic to division. I'm still appreciating some convergence right now.
Sure.
Okay. Okay. Well, if that's the case, then we can go ahead and we can adjust that so you're not sitting there for 2 hours.
And that's, yeah, I mean, realistically, we're sitting there for quite possibly 4 to 5 hours. Because he will be complete 1000 hours. They will already have received a splash with Alpha and Bravo. MFP1 will have already shifted up to support secondary for our breach, so that way we can echelon fires. So we're ready to go no later than noon. Okay. So that's a 4-hour gap. But what I don't want to lose, sir, is tempo.
No,
is the biggest thing.
I'm with you. 3, let's go ahead and make that adjustment to the sync map, and we can push a frago after this. I think that is probably a viable, so long as I have enough artillery where I can still execute suppression and obscuration and counter battery simultaneously. I feel pretty comfortable with that. In this next clip, we'll see the importance of a brigade combat team understanding convergence as its higher headquarters aligns assets to enable its fight, and then making sure that that's understood at echelon throughout the brigade.
So 14 to 1600 division deep area is phase line Annie, north of our area of operations, up towards phase line Penelope. How we're nested within the division operation, we're currently in phase 2 Alpha. Our actions as we cross phase line Courtney triggers 2 things within the division operation. To our east, we have 52 CAD, who will conduct a deliberate attack into EA bugs to attack elements of assets of the 56 TTG. With that allows 252 to continue their attack onto Detective Black Knights. Conditions for us to move in the division to the next phase of the operation from east to west is Detective Black Knight sees. In our AO, we've destroyed or defeated the 801st BTG in AO Dagger, and in the west, we've got 152 guarding on our western flank.
Convergence is the characteristic of multi-domain operations that creates and expands windows of opportunity against peer threats. The brigade needs to understand, make sure they're nested with division, and understand when those massing of effects is going to enable their maneuver. That's closely tied to their synchronization to make sure that they are leveraging all those effects at the right time in the right space to make sure that they can achieve their assigned objective. They need to understand this, and it needs to be part of their combined arms rehearsal. Appreciating when we're consuming convergence is critically important to make sure that the plan is well synchronized and nested with our higher headquarters. In this next clip, we're going to see the importance of reviewing the decision support matrix and making sure everybody understands those things that are going to drive a decision for the commander. This scene focuses on decision point 2, with the commitment of 118 to move through the breach at Red Lake Pass, or to bypass the breach if that breach will fail, and then move north straight into Siberia, onward into their seizure of objective Tigers. In 163 Armor, we'll discuss the criteria for decision point on what happens if they lose a company's worth of combat power, their breaching assets, or if the obstacles exceed their capacity to breach.
This leads into your decision point 2. I see 2 criteria that could be met that would spark that. 1, a loss of a company's worth of combat power, either from Alpha Company or Charlie Company. Secondary to that is unable to breach with the 9 MICLICs and the 3 ABBs that we do have. Because if we try and take from 270 that has your alternate engineer capabilities or 118, that does not leave you redundancy. So I think those 2 conditions would spark the trigger to be met for your decision point 2, in which 118 would then not go through Red Lake Pass and in turn go through 270's AO.
Hey, 335, I'd like to add that to the and condition. I think that's a good point. You know, in terms of where we see combat power in 163, and then specifically the loss of a company and the loss of breach assets. I think stratifying that way is critical. So I think great. Thank you.
Sir, if the obstacle effort remained the same, it would take approximately 5 MICLICs to go through there. So 4 is our magic number. More than 4 MICLICs lost, and then we would no longer have the capability to breach them.
Okay, let's fight through this turn. We'll get the read for everybody else, and then we'll work through the decision point, what that looks like. What we just saw over the course of the last clip, we saw everybody review the decision support matrix and make sure that the requisite requirements to make that decision are commonly understood at Echelon. All warfighting functions are important to be present at the Combined Arms rehearsal. They need to be represented, and they need to talk to their respective friction. What that does not mean is that the staff gets to take away and start rebriefing their pieces of the order, but they do need to understand where they sit in terms of synchronization of the overall fight. So if they need to adjust predicated on a change in maneuver, they can go ahead and do so. The Combined Arms Rehearsal is a critical event that allows commanders, staff, and enablers to synchronize their plan, actions, and responsibilities across warfighting functions in time and space to ensure good execution of their plan. It's often the last point where problem identification can happen, and oftentimes is the last time that commanders can all get together and problem solve before we go to our disparate tactical assembly areas and launch on our adventure. All participants should walk out of the Combined Arms rehearsal with a shared understanding of the overall operation and where they sit in time and space. Again, my name's Lieutenant Colonel Adam Latham. I'm Bronco 07, train the force.